Walk in London.
Let the real battle commence. Populist nationalism and global liberalism are to fight it out here in France. On the one side, Emmanuel Macron, who sells himself as a radical outsider, but who aims to reform and preserve the existing order. On the other, Marine Le Pen, the real anti-establishment outsider, but she came in second, so starts from behind. We'll ask a Front National campaign official whether the party is capable of broadening its appeal to keep Macron out.
And here in Britain, Labour is about to launch its Brexit strategy, but the architect of previous Labour landslides is in the dark. But what is the Labour position on Brexit now?
Well, search me.
And in an exclusive interview, Facebook's Sheryl Sandberg talks to us about how she came to terms with her husband's sudden death.
There are so many bad moments. There's no one worse moment. But on all of it was this feeling that it would never get better. And I now know that that's not true.
Good evening, welcome to Paris. And here in France, round one is over. And after an election campaign of twists and turns, the big surprise was the lack of big surprise. But it is a huge turning point all the same. The established parties became marginalised in third and fifth place. And now the contest comes down to a showdown between nationalistic populism and globalist liberalism. That is the battle being fought across the West. France is now divided down the middle. The radical candidates who want to overthrow the existing order. Le Pen on the populist right, Mélenchon on the left, 6 fringe candidates as well. They got a total of 49.6% of the vote. In other words, half. There is an enormous well of discontent out there. For now, Emmanuel Macron is the man to watch. The best hope for a battered establishment of seeing off the radicals. But the twists continue in this campaign because tonight his opponent Marine Le Pen has stepped aside from the presidency of her own party. She wants to be above partisan politics, she says. It is and has been an extraordinary contest. Last night's results led to joy in the Macron camp in Paris.
Nous avons changé le visage de la vie politique française.
Joy at the Le Pen camp at her stronghold in the north of France. Disappointment at the bases of the traditional parties and scuffles in Bastille. This is where French revolutions occur or are commemorated. Here, anti-fascist protesters clashed with riot police. So, the morning after, less a sense of revolution or of physical fights, just a public struggling to think things through. Who do you vote for now? Macron, Le Pen?
Well, obviously Macron, because we can't let that happen. There's no way in hell that we're going to let that happen. I mean, she does not represent what this country stands for. She appeals to people's fear and she makes them afraid of what could be or what but I'm just hoping that France will not give in to that.
Abstention.
I'll abstain.
Oui?
J'ai pas envie de voter pour lui.
Yes, I don't want to vote for him, so he won't get my vote. I won't vote Le Pen either because he'll be president regardless.
C'est lui qui va être président.
J'ai voté pour Mélenchon.
I voted for Mélenchon.
Oui.
Le deuxième tour?
J'ai voté pour Macron, c'est évident.
I'll vote for Macron, obviously.
Oui. Avec enthusiasm? Avec enthusiasm?
Non, j'ai voté Macron parce que je vais voter.
I'm going to vote for Macron because I'll be voting against Marine Le Pen. I think lots of people will do the same thing.
Beaucoup de personnes vont faire la même chose, je pense.
We're obviously in the midst of enormous political upheaval washing over the West. Just look at the patterns. The rise of a populist right, whether it's Farage, Trump or Le Pen. The rise of a populist left, whether it's Corbyn, Bernie Sanders or Mélenchon here. The difficulties of established parties, particularly the traditional left of centre. The gulf between the big metropolitan areas and the secondary towns and cities. Here in Paris, Le Pen only got 5% of the vote. Parts of northern France, she was on 30%. So, very clear patterns. But in each country, there are some peculiarities. And it's those that might dictate the outcome here. In this case, she is no Trump. While she is the change candidate, she comes with historic baggage, her party's past image, so she'll struggle to win. He, on the other hand, is no Hillary Clinton. Yes, he's really about saving the current system from itself, but he's managed to sell himself as a revolutionary. The contest is his to lose.
Ensemble, jusqu'à la victoire!
But it's not a mere formality. Many left-leaning voters hate his economic liberalism. They'll abstain rather than vote for him, giving Le Pen a route to power, albeit an unlikely one. Whatever happens in 2 weeks' time, it's going to be interesting for France. Obviously, if Marine Le Pen wins, it will be. If Macron wins, just think about his next 5 years. He has got to use that time to reach out to Le Pen voters and woo them back to the mainstream. He's got to somehow reform France and get the system working here. And he's got to do all of that at the same time as finishing a political revolution. He's got a brand new political party, he's got elections in June, and he somehow has to get his people into that parliamentary building behind me. It's going to be quite a journey.
Macron, for me, is a Kennedy. Is kind of a Kennedy. I mean, he's handsome, he's clever, he speaks very well, but we needed kind of a nasty Johnson in order to get the Bills of Rights and the big society, because Kennedy made wonderful speeches, but he had a very problematic foreign policy, and he couldn't get the laws he promised voted. And it was a Lyndon Johnson who was much less sexy, that knew the Senate by heart, that knew the Congress.
Who did the dirty politics.
And he got the things done.
Round 1 is over, round 2 begins, but the real work is for the winner in round 3, bringing France together after a bruising period of debate and division. I can't stress enough how Marmite Macron is. Many love him. French voters outside of France, in London for example, gave him a big lead. But many here don't like him. I spoke to a taxi driver last night who was incredibly frustrated and said he could never vote for either Macron or Le Pen. There are posters, tout sauf Macron, anyone but Macron. And that is why it is interesting for the populist case that Marine Le Pen is so far behind in the polls. Can she reach out to those on the left who like her anti-globalization but don't like her? Is that why she's distanced herself from her own party tonight? Well, I'm joined by Michael Sala, who's on Marine Le Pen's campaign committee and chairs Croissance Bleu Marine, which is a supportive think tank. Very good evening to you. Why has she stepped down from the leadership of her own party tonight?
Well, it's very simple. She's getting ready for the job she's getting in a couple of weeks, you know. She won't be at the same time president of Front National and president of France, so she made the move right now and she's getting ready. Okay. Makes a lot of sense. The timing's perfect.
Just a factual thing. Will she go back to being leader of the party if she loses the presidency in 2 weeks?
Well, the first thing is we win this one.
Yeah, but just let's suppose that you don't. Now what will happen?
The second thing is I personally, as a member of Front National, wish she remains the boss because she's such a great boss to work for.
So I'm assuming she will go back to the leadership.
Yeah, well, I hope so, definitely. Right. But she will win.
Okay. You see, there's another theory around on this, which is that the tarnished brand is the brand of the Front National. And she knows there are votes out there. French people are economically nationalist, many of them. We've seen that in this vote. And they just won't quite bring themselves to vote for your party.
Now, there are several questions in one. First thing is, the French presidential election is not an election between a party and the people of France. It's an election between a political personality and the people of France. And that's always been the case, as opposed to parliamentary election, which are an election between a party and the people. That's one thing. But had this been the case, she would have resigned from the presidency of Front National months ago. You know, of course not. It's just like the launch pad. We launched the rocket Marine Le Pen, and now is the time to let the rocket go and fly.
How do you broaden your appeal then, Michael? I mean, because effectively you're at about 38 in the polls, Macron's at 60-something. you're just a long way from it. How do you say you're going to win? How are you going to do it? How do you broaden that pitch to the people who are scared of the Front National?
Well, you know, when you look at things, we have been center stage during this whole campaign, because the world, the Western world, is very tired of the concept of fierce globalization. You know, the globalization that has created wealth.
See, I think you're right. There are people who are scared of it, but why then are you 38% in the polls, not at 58% in the polls?
Well, it's coming. You know, it's what we say. The first round is there for the people to express themselves, and then they choose the candidate who they feel is best suited for the job. And let me tell you one thing: the French will choose Marine Le Pen because she is the only statesperson left in this country today. Emmanuel Macron is not a statesman. First of all, he's a little bit young for the job, and the way he's behaved, you know, going to Berlin and to meet Mrs. Merkel for a job interview, he's no statesman. The only statesperson in this country is Marine Le Pen. This is why she doesn't need to fight to broaden her appeal. Her appeal is broad enough, and it will show in a couple of weeks.
There are lots of people who think this is not the same party that it was 20 years ago, but it has many of the same people in it who were there 20 years ago, including Marine Le Pen. Now, do you think it is the same party that it was 20 years ago, or is it a different party?
Well, it is different, but it's a continuing story, you know? And I personally joined the Front National in 2013, which is not too long ago.
See, now that's very much later, but Marine Le Pen was there when she was 18, back at, what 30 years ago. So you can see why some people, and you must have come across this, some people just think of this party as essentially fascism light, or whatever word you want to use. Yeah. You've moved a long way, sure, but your vote share has only grown by 3%. You've got a lot more to do since the last presidential election.
You know, parties evolve. It doesn't stick. The sort of accusation that the party is nationalist, it doesn't stick. The French know that it's not the truth, because what Marine Le Pen stands for is patriotism. She says that what makes France great, or what made France great, is that France had the ability to make French out of people coming from anywhere, you know, around the world. That's what we lost somewhere along the way because of the sheer number of migrants that this country had to take in. We cannot take in so many people now anymore. So we have to reduce the number of migrants in order to make sure that France has this ability to make French people again by assimilating them to our culture, because French is not an ethnic country, it's a cultural country, it's a philosophical country.
We need to leave it there. Michael Sala, the debate begins for the next 2 weeks. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Well, the Socialist Party's candidate did appallingly badly. Benoît Hamon's more pro-EU stance left him trailing the independent left-winger Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Hamon ended up with 6%. Working for his election was the MP Axelle Lemaire. She's been the Minister for the Digital Economy and represents the French citizens who live outside the country in Britain and Northern Europe. I asked her what lesson can her party draw from the election.
One of the main lessons of the first round is that people want a new generation of politicians. They want to see new faces. It's a no vote in the sense that it's an anti-system vote. And Emmanuel Macron was smart enough to play that card. The Socialist Party wasn't good enough to renew itself. I think times have changed, and party politics in the way it used to work doesn't work any longer.
You'll vote for Macron, obviously,
yes,
in the second round. Many people who really want big change, but who don't like Marine Le Pen, where do they go? My feeling is some of them will just abstain.
I think it's a source of concern, and it shouldn't be underestimated. I'm particularly worried coming from the conservative activists, because François Fillon called for a vote in favor of Emmanuel Macron yesterday evening, but the reality is that his core supporters, they're anti-gay rights, they're anti-abortion, they're anti-Islam, not anti-Islamism, and some of them are closer in their position to Marine Le Pen than to Emmanuel Macron.
Let me finish by asking you, when you look at the French political establishment. Do you think they deserve a kick up the backside? Because they've got one.
Can I be honest about this? I think they do.
Axel Lemaire there. Well, let's take stock of where we are. Veteran journalists Christina Krent and Pierre Asqui are with me, as they always seem to be when we talk about the French election. Very good evening to you again. Let's just start on the socialists. Can they get this back together? I mean, they've obviously, the official party has done so badly. Do they ever come back? Or
which socialists are you talking about?
Well, the Parti Socialiste, the one that we've been governing from time to time.
You mean the late Parti Socialiste? I mean, their performance is the worst since what, the 50s?
Since the fair.
But socialism did quite well, and you made that point because Mélenchon came.
Mélenchon will certainly claim that he represents the new, true, socialist flame ready to
Corbyn
actually illuminate.
Closer to Corbyn socialism.
Very much so.
Yes, but the Mélenchon has managed to do what Podemos has not succeeded to do in Spain. That means kill the official Socialist Party. And so here we have this situation where the socialists are left to be picked, what's left of them.
And some will go towards Macron, presumably, the more liberal-minded ones.
Yeah, but don't forget Manuel Valls, who still has the sort of legitimacy for the Social Democrat brand, which of course Macron has very much stolen to his own benefit. But I'm sure that Manuel Valls will try and make a comeback somehow.
Fight not over on that. Look, let's talk about the Republicans, the Conservative, the right-wing party, because they could easily have won this if they had put up a candidate who wasn't regarded as corrupt by most people.
Well, that's why they all say now that primaries are it's a terrible system. But François Fillon did win their primary with a huge margin.
He managed to transform an election that he could not lose into an election that he could not win. And that's why the party is mad at him. Every leader of that party is mad at him, and he paid the price today. He was.
In fairness, they had all the other candidates they were talking about all had issues and question marks over them as well, didn't they? I mean, they all had.
But it will be interesting to see how Alain Juppé will probably make his comeback, and want to lead the party, and still keep, the 40 to 45 years old, the youngest conservative crowd under leash.
The problem is that you're going to have these legislative elections in June, and so people are split between maybe they want to join Macron and help the new rejuvenation of politics, but on the other side there's local politics, and there are constituencies, and there are people have invested in their lives there.
Yeah, a new party system trying to sort of break out an old one.
No, but and also these people want to keep their seats.
Yeah,
right, and they will have to face probably Macron's candidates in their constituency.
What I think is, though, really striking is the challenge for France that is so important over the next 5 years, really, is if Macron wins, is how he reaches out to the Le Pen voters. Because everybody's got to admit, this country is very divided. There's an awful lot of discontent out there. And a lot of people are feeling they need a voice, aren't they? And is Macron capable of giving them a voice and making them feel listened to? Or
that's what he's going to have to say in the coming 10 days. And we're all looking forward, of course, to the televised debate, which will take place Wednesday next week, because that will be a real moment. Not only in politics, but the psyche of the country.
The problem that if he gets elected, which I think he will, and all he does is just change the faces and not change the politics and the way we do politics in this country, and as you say, reach out to the people who voted for Marine Le Pen, because they are angry people who have legitimate reasons to be angry, then we are in trouble, because we cannot go back to business as usual in this country after what happened.
See, in a respect, you're going through the same experience as the US, but it may be that you've got a second chance, for Macron to kind of sort the existing system out before a populist takes over, if you're looking at it from that point of view. Maybe France has got something over the
main
liberals of the
difference
US.
with Donald Trump is that Emmanuel Macron knows how the state machinery works. That's the way he was educated, and that's what his experience, however brief, has been at the Élysée and in government. And what he says about the way the French state, you know, which has always been overpowerful and looked upon as a sort of a God on earth, is interesting, because I think the people you're talking about, Le Pen, but also Mélenchon voters, and also part of Fillon voters, who will not necessarily fall in love with Macron, he will have to find a way to explain how he wants to modernize the relationship between the state and the citizen.
We need to leave it there. Sorry, Pierre. That is it from now from Paris. But this election has done more than anything to crystallise and clarify the divisions in several Western countries, including our own. And so let me hand back to you in London, Kirsty.
Thanks, Evan. The reaction from France. But are there lessons of Emmanuel Macron's first-round victory for the centre-left here in the UK? Earlier this evening, I spoke to the ardent Europhile Peter Mandelson, who tonight has launched a cross-party campaign to try to secure the defeat of pro-Brexit MPs of whatever party in the coming general election, drawing up an attack list of 20 seats, held mostly by Conservative MPs, where constituents voted to stay in the EU, but of representatives who are Brexit supporters. More on that in a moment. But first, I asked Lord Mandelson whether Macron's result offers him hope.
It gives me great hope for France, and it gives me great hope for Europe. He's a strong pro-European, but he also recognises that Europe has to be reinvented. It's one thing having a great vision. It also needs a much better popular offer.
There is a picture of him, and on the shelf behind him is a copy of your book, The Third Man. Do you see him as an heir to Blair?
In a sense, yes, because he's somebody who very convincingly has set out to appeal both to the centre-left and to the centre-right, to build a new coalition, a new majority in France, who will give him backing for the sort of reforms that he wants to see through, but which you cannot see through in France without a big body of support behind you.
But then what is the lesson for the centre-left here? Is it that you really have to break with, as it were, the old left?
I think you have to be prepared, as Macron did, to construct a campaign outside conventional norms or conventional outlook or attitudes. I mean, the public are absolutely
outside the
desperate.
party? I mean, outside the party?
Well, in his case, yes, because the Parti Socialiste in France was collapsing, was crumbling around their ears. There really wasn't a centre-left party with which to campaign anymore worth its name.
Like in the UK,
now,
you would suggest?
That isn't the case in Britain, where we still have a Labour Party. Going through, obviously, the trials and tribulations that we've become familiar with. But I think the key point about Macron is that although he knew he had to appeal to both centre-left and centre-right, he knew he had to stand for something. He needed values, he has to have a clear sense of where he wanted to take the country.
And do you see anyone who's a Macron-type figure here for the centre-left? Do you identify anybody?
No, because the people who are emerging within the Labour Party and not outside it, as Macron had to do. He had no alternative.
But who do you see emerging in the Labour Party that has that centre-left mantle?
I'm not going to tantalise you with names and guesses. All I know is that there are a younger generation in the Labour Party. They do have that sense of vigour and that sense of commitment, and one of them will come forward in order to lead the party to eventual victory. But that is, I'm afraid, some way off.
So is there a circumstance, do you think, when voting Labour will not necessarily deliver the best result for the kind of Brexit that you would like to see, if you want to see a Brexit at all?
Look, I'm a supporter of Open Britain, the largest pro-European membership organisation in the country. What they want to do is to campaign in the most effective way against a hard Brexit, against giving Theresa May the blank cheque that she's looking for in this election to take Britain out of Europe, in my view, on the worst terms imaginable.
So this cross-party grouping, as it were, is launching its campaign now to give support for the most pro-Remain candidate standing. Do you accept that might not be a Labour candidate?
But also to oppose those who are supporters of the hard Brexit. And yes, they will be different people from different parties.
So in that sense, what you're saying is in some constituencies it actually might be better to park your vote with the Liberal Democrats than for Labour. It just may be.
But that's for people to decide. We're not telling people how to vote. If you want to know how I would vote if I had a vote in this election, members of the House of Lords don't, but if they did, I'd be supporting and voting for the Labour candidate. The point, Kirsty, is this is not to tell people how to vote. It's to advise them and help them to make the most effective intervention in constituencies around the country that could make a difference to the sort of majority that Theresa May gets at the end of it, and she's most likely to do. I mean, that's what democracy is all about.
But what is the Labour position on Brexit now?
Well, search me. I mean, I think you need to wait for the manifesto. I mean, the problem for the Labour Party in this election on Brexit is very clear, and that is that they are not, I'm afraid, differentiating their position and their policy sufficiently from the government, or haven't done so up until now, which they needed to do if they were going to offer the voters a clear choice. But I hope that will come out in the wash. I hope in the coming days and weeks we will see a clearer, rather more robust approach from the Labour Party on this, because Labour Party supporters and voters and members right across the country are looking for leadership on Brexit rather than an equivocal, rather more fence-sitting position and approach we've had to date.
If there is a defeat of the Labour Party, and just say Jeremy Corbyn puts on 1 million votes still, should he stay? He may see that as a mandate to carry on. What would you say about that?
I hope he doesn't stay. Any leader who has the control of the party that he does, who will run the campaign in the way that he chooses, must also own the result that he gets, and he must take see the conclusion that defeat presents him with and fall on his sword. I hope he will do that.
Well, that's interesting.
I mean, any person with an ounce of loyalty or responsibility to the Labour Party would do precisely that.
Just coming back to Brexit and the idea that the thing that you're desperately trying to stop is a hard Brexit. Do you think that Brexit itself is an inevitability?
We are set on a course to leave the European Union. We've had the referendum, we know the result. What we don't know, Kirsty, and this is absolutely fundamentally important, is how we're going to leave the European Union, on what terms, with what future trade deal between Britain and the European Union. Now, on that, here's the point, in my view. The government is deliberately narrowing its options. I don't believe there is a one-size-fits-all Brexit. There are different permutations, there are different types of Brexit, different terms on which we can both leave the European Union and secure the greatest continuity of our trade in and with the European Union. And my complaint and my criticism of the government is that they're narrowing their options, they're taking options off the table. We know why. It's for purely political and purely ideological reasons, because she's giving in to the wild men in her party. That's what she's doing. And in the process, she's sacrificing our nation's interest.
Finally, are you proud to be a saboteur, a proud saboteur of Brexit?
I couldn't be more pleased with the Daily Mail calling me a saboteur and saying that I had to be crushed. The other day, the Sun newspaper devoted a leader to denouncing my treachery and my lack of patriotism. I tell you, I am as patriotic as the next person, but one thing I am not is a nationalist. I love my country, that's why I am a patriot. I do not hate other countries as nationalists do.
Proud saboteur, Peter Mandelson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Labour's Brexit spokesman, Keir Starmer, will be setting out Labour's position on the Today programme, Radio 4 at 8:10 tomorrow morning. Sheryl Sandberg, the chief operating officer of Facebook, came to the world's attention 4 years ago when Lean In was published, a handbook designed to help professional women reach their career goals and overcome the barriers that exist for women in the workplace. It quickly became a bestseller. Then, in May 2015, her husband, Dave Goldberg, died tragically after sustaining a head injury when he fell from a treadmill. After his death, Sandberg felt certain that she and her children would never feel pure joy again. But a friend, Adam Grant, a psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania, told her about concrete steps people can take to help them recover from life-shattering experiences. Together, they've written a book, Option B, Facing Adversity, Building Resilience and Finding Joy. Emily spoke to Sheryl Sandberg.
My biggest fear is that my kids would never be happy again, that all of their happiness would have been wiped away in that instant. And so I turned to my friend, Adam Grant, who's a psychologist, and asked him what I could do. How do I get my kids through this? How do I get myself through this? And I learned that resilience is not something we have a set amount of. It's a muscle. We build it. We build it in ourselves, in each other, in our children. And option B is our attempt to share what we learned from the researchers who've studied this for a really long time, from other people who have faced all forms of adversity.
And how do you get away then from that sense that what you're feeling at the worst moment will be with you forever?
It's about rejecting permanence in psychologist language. It's about when it is so bad, knowing or believing it can get better. Those early moments of grief, I felt like I was stuck into a void, like I could barely breathe. My brother-in-law talked about it, who's Dave's brother, as a boot stuck on his chest, pushing him in. And people told me who had been through it, this gets better. Adam told me it gets better, and I did not believe them. And I'm hoping Option B can do that, can tell people no matter how bad it feels, the sadness lingers, it's still with me today, but it does get better. And one of the ways you can make it get better is just believe it's possible. You don't have to feel it because you're not going to, but you just have to know. And the other thing is paying attention to the little tiny moments when it's okay. I was waiting to feel okay. I wasn't going to feel okay, but a couple weeks and months in, or even days in, I could laugh at one funny thing someone said and feel okay for a minute, a second. And knowing that, and then being able to say, okay, other people have been through this, you can get to the other side, makes a really big difference in recovery.
What was the worst moment for you? Was it right at the beginning, or did it hit much later?
I found him on a gym floor. My brother-in-law kind of pulled me off his body when he was in the hospital, and they were like, we have to go. He had died hours before. I told my children they lost their father. Like, there are so many bad moments. There's no one worse moment. But on all of it was this feeling that it would never get better. And I now know that that's not true. It did get better. I'm still sad. I still miss him. But there are things I've learned through this, and knowing that there was a path to that boot getting lifted off your chest was so important.
And what was the most helpful thing? Was there one thing that you point to above all else that helped?
Probably gratitude. And it's so counterintuitive. How do you go through tragedy and trauma and come out feeling more grateful? But one day Adam said to me, you know, you really should think about how things could be worse. I looked at him like he was crazy. Worse? Things could be worse? I just lost my husband suddenly. And he looked at me and said, Dave could have had that same cardiac arrhythmia driving your children. I could have lost all three of them in that same instant. Never occurred to me. And actually, the minute you say it, even here, you're like, okay, I'm good. My kids are alive. I didn't lose all three of them. And finding ways to feel grateful for what we have left, for no matter how hard things are, for the good things in our life, is actually a gift. You know, it never occurred to me that Dave would not turn 48. It never occurred to me to feel grateful for birthdays, and now I do.
You talk about the moment when you pushed against the bottom and finally found that kickoff to get back up to the surface. What was that?
One thing Adam told me was that happiness is not found in the big stuff. It's actually found in the small stuff. After Dave died, I was waiting to feel better. I was going to feel better. And on the way there, I was not doing anything fun. I was working, I was taking care of my children. I'd spend the rest of my time crying. And then one day I went to a bar mitzvah, and a childhood friend pulled me on the dance floor, and I danced for like a minute, and I felt okay. It was about 4 months after Dave died, and then I just burst into tears because I think I felt so guilty that I felt okay even for a minute. And I needed permission to feel better. My brother-in-law, Dave's brother, gave it to me, and it was one of the most important things that's happened in my life. He called me one day crying, and he said, Cheryl, all Dave ever wanted was for you and your children to be happy. Don't take that away from him.
And there's a role for social media in grief. You turned to Facebook to write that post after the formal grieving period ended, where I remember vividly you said, don't ask me how I am, ask me how I am today, trying to help people help you.
I know I work at Facebook and I believe deeply in Facebook's mission, but I have a whole new understanding of what it can mean to people going through tragedy as it was for me. You know, after I lost Dave, it wasn't just the grief, it was like isolation. I came back to work, I'd always had very friendly relationships with my colleagues, and no one knew what to say to me. So often they said nothing at all, and they kind of looked at me like I was a ghost. And so there's the Jewish period of mourning for a spouse. It's called Shaloshim. At the end of that period, I wrote a post about how I was feeling. And the night before I went to sleep, I said, there's no way I'm posting this. It's too honest and too raw and too personal. And then the next morning, I felt so terrible. I thought nothing can be worse. It couldn't be better. And I posted, and it really helped. But for me, having people say, how are you today? Having people acknowledge kicking the elephant out of the room was so important, and very much the path to writing this book.
I guess social media can also be a place that amplifies grief, though. I mean, I've spoken to grieving mothers who've, you know, got trolled after a traumatic event. It's sort of unthinkable. But did you witness any of that yourself?
You know, 1.8 billion people on our platform, things happen, and those are things we don't want to happen and we take very seriously and try to take the appropriate action. For me, Facebook became the place where Dave's memories were stored. You know, people would walk up to me in those early days and still today and tell me stories. And I loved hearing those stories, but, you know, in the fog of grief, I wasn't going to remember all of them, and I wasn't going to remember all the details perfectly to save them for my children, who are going to know their father mostly through the stories because they were so young when he died. And so Dave's Facebook page is where those stories live, and people's names and people's faces, and I look at it all the time.
You have such, of course, a positive sense of what social media can do. But there's also this sense now, isn't there, that the internet, we used to think of as providing unambiguous improvement to the world, and now it feels like the mood is shifting, whether it's polarizing us politically or eating into our privacy or our relationships. Do you sense that backlash against the digital revolution?
Any technology I know can be used for good and can be used for ill purposes, and it's our job to make sure that people can share and connect on Facebook, and that we take the right steps to mitigate the harm when the technology is used in the wrong ways. One of the things that I think really helps Facebook is we have real identity. People behave better when their names and their faces are attached to it. Some people will still make awful comments and some people will still troll, but a lot of the bad comments go away when you can't do them anonymously.
Tell me one thing, the rumor is that Silicon chiefs know how addictive screen time can be for their kids. Do you have the same problems as the rest of us, or how do you manage that with your kids?
Well, I think that there's a lot of good that happens online. Both of my children go online. They research things for school, even in elementary school. They have access to information that I could have never, ever had. And we have rules around screen time in my house as well. My son has a phone. He's older. My daughter does not. We have, you know, no phone at the table, no phone during meals, no phone before bedtime type of rules.
Facebook's been very proactive in combating fake news. You have this disputed content warning sign now on some of your sites. Do you feel that this is a gesture that you are morphing from platform to publisher?
We're really a platform, and we take our responsibilities on false news very seriously. False news hurts everyone because it makes our community uninformed, it hurts our community, it hurts countries. And we know that people want to see accurate news on Facebook, and that's what we want them to see.
So you have to become a publisher and editorial voice now.
I don't think we have to be the publisher, and we definitely don't want to be the arbiter of the truth. We don't think that's appropriate for us. We think everyone needs to do their part. Newsrooms have to do their part, media companies, classrooms, and technology companies. we're focused on decreasing the financial incentives for false news, because a lot of times it is financially motivated.
Do you think fake news though is with us for life, or will it be gone?
Well, we all have to do our part to make sure that people see accurate information, and figuring out how we do that is something that we're going to have to see and will evolve, but we know the goal. The goal is for people to see accurate information on Facebook and everywhere else.
Charles Sandberg, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's about it for tonight. But before we go, pop fans celebrated today as it was announced that the original lineup of the 80s girl group Bananarama were reforming for the first time since 1988. And with an election in the air, what better way to remember Karen, Siobhan and Sarah than with this highly political promo for their 1988 Greatest Hits album. Good night.
Smash hits from Bananarama, the most successful British girl group ever, guaranteed to get any party going.